Good evening. Welcome to This Happy Guru. My name's Kirsty Bentley Taylor. I'm continuing on with my series Ancient Antidotes today. And this week I want to be looking at fasting. Now, fasting's become a little bit of a buzzword, I feel like, certainly in the last few years. There's been much more talk about it than I ever remember hearing before. And the conversation's been mixed. Things have been said that are pro-fasting, and there's a lot of stuff that's been said negatively about fasting. But I suppose I want to start with my personal relationship with fasting, because I use fasting as a way of maintaining my health. I use it in a number of different ways, and I'm going to go through those ways with you. But I was first introduced to fasting in Asia when we were living in Thailand. Every year they have, for the month of October, they have a vegetarian festival, and the whole country, almost, if you're Buddhist anyway, goes vegetarian. Suddenly stalls spring up from the side of the road, and meat can't be found kind of anywhere, and they have loads of different really weird rituals that go with it, which is the thing that really grabs your attention as a foreigner in that country, because there's a lot of sort of self-mutilation. They have loads of, it's all about connecting in with spirit, and it's all about becoming as pure as you possibly can so that you can connect in with spirit. Now, if you dare to Google vegetarian festival in Thailand, you'll see people pushing swords through their cheeks, sticking knives in their tongues, and battering themselves with medieval looking equipment as they walk down the street with Chinese firecrackers going off everywhere. Everybody's dressed in white to impart kind of an idea of purity and cleanliness, and that their bodies are pure, so that the spirits can pass through them. And it really is one of those crazy, crazy sights that you can't quite believe you're witnessing when you're standing on the side of the road and you've never seen anything like this before, and like 500 people walk past or drive past self-mutilating. And it's en masse, and it's pretty much in every city and town throughout Thailand, and it's quite the sight to behold. And it really got me thinking one year, it's like, what is the belief system around this? Like, these people are cutting their tongues with razor blades. I remember seeing one guy coming through down the town centre with a satellite dish on its kind of pedestal thing, on its like little arm, stuck through his cheek. And a guy with, like I say, a medieval kind of, you know, one of those balls with all the spike things that come off it, just lashing himself on the back like that in the back of a truck. Blood pouring down from his shoulders and his back all the way down into his white trousers. People with eyes kind of rolling back into their head, dressed up almost like shaman or medicine women, but with the kind of the whites of their eyes constantly flickering, like really crazy stuff, and nothing that I'd ever experienced before in religion or in culture or anything like that. So it really got me thinking about what it was exactly that they were trying to achieve through this, and whether or not changing your diet could actually affect your ability to conduct or conduce spirit, and whether or not that was, you know, only restricted to kind of the belief system around this particular festival, that the spirits, you know, of ancestors and the Holy Spirit, if you like, can come through and pass through you, allowing you to express yourself like this, almost to purge the you know, all kind of the bad things, I suppose, that mankind is capable of, for the sake of mankind, only to recover pretty much perfectly within a week afterwards. So this is the crazy thing. This is the thing that gets you really thinking, is that you then see these people in the local market and on the street, and they might have like a little, you know, a little patch over their cheek, but they might, and obviously those people who are, you know, mutilating their back and all that sort of thing have their clothes on again, so you don't really see them, but you see them like 2 or 3 days later, and they look healed. They look fine. They look like you would have seen them before the vegetarian festival came along. And it's bizarre. You know, there's some level of my mind anyway that could not quite compute that this was the person I saw the other day lashing their tongue with razor blades, you know, like tied to an end of a stick, and lashing their tongue with blood sort of spurting out everywhere. And then the next time I see them is in the market. I say hello to them. They smile and say hello back, and sawadee ka, and all that sort of thing. And it's just like nothing's happened. There's no mutilated mouth. I would expect like some huge swollen tongue or weird stuff going on around the mouth and stuff like this. But no, nothing. And So there's a part of me that, although it doesn't quite compute in my mind, for my culture, for my upbringing, that this experience that they put themselves through would be able to be healed, you know, like that almost. It kind of feeds into the idea that it actually is the spirit coming through that's performing these things. And actually, once the spirit is removed, then the body is able to heal, and, you know, all the kind of everything's able to go back to normal, almost like it never happened. So I got to thinking about the vegetarian festival and the fact that really the only thing that they cut out is meat. They eat at certain periods of the day, usually more in the morning, more in the evening. The lunchtime tends to be quite sparse, which is not really normal for Thai culture. They take their mealtime seriously. But the morning and the evening are the times when you would go out and you would buy your food and eat your food within a group setting. So you tend to kind of, anybody who's celebrating or marking the festival tends to get together, and they tend to eat together. And you might eat in the monastery, you might eat in one of the temples there, the Wats. Equally, you can buy your food from various little shops that spring up selling amazing vegetarian food, or even you can go and buy it in the market. You know, people are you know, who usually would sell meat are then selling vegetarian food as part of the celebration, as part of their reverence towards the Buddhist ceremony that's going on around them. So I kind of decided to give it a go, and I cut out, this was when I was a meat eater, and I cut out meat completely for that whole vegetarian month. And there was a lot of things that I noticed. I diarized the whole thing. I did like a journal throughout the whole thing, and I wrote down a lot of the things that I was experiencing throughout the day. So I kept my journal with me, and from the morning I noticed that the first thing was that, you know, one of the first things that I noticed really was that I wasn't so hungry first thing in the morning, where I used to kind of wake up and feel like, oh, breakfast. I wasn't really feeling that anymore. There'd been some sort of shift, and I later on in the month, I kind of aligned it to actually the detachment from food as being really a source of comfort. You know, I think before I became a vegetarian and now vegan, I attached a lot of comfort to eating meat, I think. You know, this is kind of the way I see myself, and my patterns, and the way that I've kind of built up this relationship with food. And we all have a relationship with food. So it's important, I think, to actually have a look at that at certain times and really feel into what your relationship is, whether it's a healthy relationship. I know I've always been guilty of comfort eating. Certainly, you know, late at night as well, if I'm tired, first thing I kind of would automatically reach for is, you know, like a packet of biscuits or something like that. You know, it's just something to kind of like munch on while I'm sitting and watching a movie, something like that. And I really began to realize that as I detached from the meat, I was detaching from the resonance of food that I had in my mind. Like, you know, I think my dad was one of the first people who kind of expressed to me that he didn't feel like he'd been fed if he hadn't eaten meat with his meal. My aunt was always a vegetarian, so it would often crop up in conversations when we all got together as a family. You know, oh, you're not going to have any of this, Liz. Oh, you know, you should. It's lovely. And she would always stoically be like, no, I'm fine. I've got my nut roast, or I'm just going to do the vegetables, or whatever she used to do. And so, yeah, I think he was kind of perhaps one of the people that put in my mind, if you like, that actually you haven't eaten a full meal unless you've eaten it with meat. And now I feel so differently about it. And practicing vegetarianism throughout this month really showed me that actually if I cut off from meat, how did I feel? It was actually after that I went back into eating meat slowly. I didn't go sort of headlong back into it. I felt back into it, but there were certain flavors that I really missed, certain things. I was always a massive fan of prawns, and I used to love my fish. So those sorts of things I went straight back into it, like, oh, dying for some, you know, some garlic prawns, for example. But it certainly made me realize that by detaching from the meat, I had detached from a certain link that I had emotionally with food. And it made me feel better about the level of control that I could then exert over my diet. So I also found out through like my journaling and looking back over the course of the month what it was. I found out that actually because of that emotional attachment, at the very beginning of the month, I was quite hangry. I always think, you know, like, I don't know if you've heard that saying, hungry and angry. You know, when you get hungry, you get angry. And I found that around the middle of the day, I was getting quite hangry. But by about 2 or 3 o'clock, that had passed. it was almost a peak of, you know, what you haven't eaten yet. You know, it felt like that. You know, that my body was sort of saying to me, or my mind was saying to me, you know, you should have eaten twice by now. What are you doing? And again, it showed me really that I had a certain attachment to the 3 meals a day thing. Now, when I was traveling earlier in my life, some days you just don't have 3 meals a day. Sometimes you only have 1 meal a day. Sometimes if you have to get like a 5 o'clock ferry or something like that, you know, you get up at 4 o'clock, you stuff all your belongings in a bag, you check out of the guest house, you walk down to the pier, you buy your ticket, you stand there, you wait for the boat to come. The boat takes 3 or 4 hours to get to an island. By the time you've got there, it's kind of lunchtime, you're exhausted, you're tired, then you've got to kind of walk around. This is before the internet, you know, obviously. And you know, you then got to walk around finding yourself a guest house. By the time you get in there, you know, throw your bags down, you're good for nothing else but a quick nap, or you just want to wash it all off in the beautiful sea that's outside your window. And you don't actually think about eating until maybe like 4, 5, 6 o'clock. And so that whole day I would have had maybe 1 meal. And I remember really kind of being a bit like, oh, I'm a bit peckish. But the fact that I was so distracted by everything that was going on, the fact that I was traveling, the fact that I was journeying, I was kind of in pace, really began to distract my mind from the usual routine. And that was something that I really recognized when I cut off from the usual routine, is that actually there's a certain amount of almost security attached to that for me. And I think it's almost the same with a lot of people. You know, people feel like, you know, I must have breakfast, lunch and dinner. But never, ever are we, well, I speak for myself, and I speak for the number of people that I've been talking to about fasting over the last few weeks, is that actually it's very, very rare that when you sit down to either breakfast, lunch or a dinner, that you're starving for it, unless you've missed one of the other two. So if I, like, for example, if I start eating at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm not hungry at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm not that person. I know lots of people that are. And actually a couple of my friends that I spoke to about the show that I was going to be doing tonight sort of said, oh no, I must have breakfast. Like, it doesn't matter if I go without lunch, doesn't matter if I go without dinner, but I must have breakfast. And that was the interesting thing for me, was that actually when you journal back on it, when you open up the conversation with yourself about your attachment to food and the way that you eat, the lifestyle that you've chosen in terms of your eating and your nutrition, is to whether or not you've actually got attachments in there that suit you, or if they don't. So for example, if you can't miss breakfast, then have your breakfast. But if you're not hungry until like 2, 3 o'clock, then why are you eating? You know, your metabolism is telling you a different thing from what your mind is telling you. So your body is reflecting back that actually I'm still processing. You know, this stomach is full. You don't need anything. You know, maybe have a drink of water, maybe have a cup of tea, something like that. But you're not missing out on anything. You don't need to replenish yet. And then come sort of 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, begins to get a little bit rumbly, and you begin to feel a sort of an empty sensation, and you know you've had the water, so you kind of feel fine about it. And then you might go and eat like a snack or have like a late lunch or something like that. And then, you know, it's all about really finding out about yourself. And I found out for me about my emotional attachment to food. And it reflected right back at me that actually I feel safe if I've had my 3 meals a day. I feel like I must have ticked all boxes, even if I didn't need those meals, even if those meals were kind of just grabbed on the hop because I have to have lunch. You know, I have to have breakfast, I have to have dinner. And, you know, I would grab anything to tick the box of having that meal. So one of the things that I kind of got back to me as well was the fact that actually the lifestyle that I was living in terms of food and the nutrients that I was taking into my body weren't really in line with my physical self. And it really kind of began to open out, and the idea of actually maybe I don't need 3 meals a day. Actually, maybe I don't need 3 meals a day. And I really urge you to listen to everything that I've got to say about fasting, but really look into yourself and feel into yourself. Recognize the patterns of your body, not really what your mind says, you know, because your mind is the thing that's conditioned. Your body is the thing that is processing and that is going through this, and it's producing the hormones and the insulin and the glucose, and, you know, and has its own blood pressure and has its own digestive clock, if you like. You know, we've all got these body clocks, we've all got these circadian rhythms, the rhythm that basically dictates how our body clock's going to go in terms of light and dark, for example. You know, as you wake up, your consciousness begins to wake up. As the dawn comes through, your consciousness begins to lighten. You'll feel yourself coming out of deep sleep into a lighter sleep before you then wake. It's the same thing at night. When the sun goes down, slowly your metabolism begins to slow down, and you begin to feel a little bit sleepy, feel a little bit more tired, feel a little bit more lethargic, want to sort of sit down, unless there's, you know, some presiding thing that's going to be a massive party, and the adrenaline and the excitement and the anticipation and all those sorts of things kicks in. But just generally speaking, it tends to be that in the evening, as the sun sets, you know, the body clock again changes dynamic, and then you'll go into a kind of a more relaxed state throughout the evening until it's time to go to bed. And there are a lot of factors that we, as a species, have brought in to be able to control our natural body clocks. That, you know, we can switch on the light at any time of the day now and have lights and do work and cook and eat and watch TV and have distractions over what actually we should be doing with our bodies. And I believe that a lot of this disconnection from our body clocks, from our circadian rhythms, is one of the is the factor towards the amount of stress that we see on the planet at the moment. And increase of stress obviously increases disease. So we're looking, you know, as a species, we're pretty unhealthy. You know, there's not really that many other species in the world. I mean, bees aren't having a great time of it at the moment, but in terms of diseases and regular occurrence of these diseases, we're the only species on the planet that we know of that regularly is subjected to numerous diseases to do with lifestyle. And the majority of all disease is caused by lifestyle. You know, I think it's like 95% or 98%. It's huge. There's only 1 or 2% of genetic diseases that are passed down wholly through your genetics, through your DNA. A lot of the other diseases that we have, like I think it literally is 95% or something like that, all of those diseases are caused through lifestyle and stress factors that have either been inherited through conditioning through your family, self-belief systems, lifestyle choices, and the quality and, you know, of the environment effectively, and the amount of nutrition that we actually bring in for ourselves in terms of everything, in terms of the quality of the water that we drink, in terms of the quality of the air that we breathe, let alone the obvious ones of the food that we digest, and the pharmaceuticals and all the other things, you know, the late nights, the smoking, the drinking, all that sort of thing. It all contributes to what we call lifestyle risk factors. And so one of the things that I think I found was the most enlightening about this fasting experience, this first fasting experience that I had, was it really got me thinking about whether or not I actually need to be doing the things that I'm doing, whether or not I need to be eating 3 times a day, whether or not I need to actually wake up and eat straight away for breakfast, especially when I'm not hungry. Why do I feel that need if I'm not even hungry? And it kind of, you know, it got me really thinking about diet, and how we're supposed to eat, and the routines in which, you know, our ancestors would have eaten. So if you think about our ancestors, when you go back, it may have been like, if you go back to kind of cavemen, you know, the Neanderthal man, that sort of time, everything was as and when you came by it. So, for example, if you managed to kill, as the hunter of the group, for example, if you managed to kill a big animal, that animal would be shared out amongst the tribe. Now, depending on the number of people in the tribe and depending on the animal, that might be a small bite to eat, or it might be a huge feast. You know, or it might be that they actually ate consecutive meals, you know, in the morning and then in the evening, you know, throughout for a long period of time. If you look at how we are now, where food is available everywhere at every turn, I mean, you can't even buy petrol without being faced with food. You know, you can't put gas in your car without having to walk past a barrage of chocolates and crisps and fast food, let alone being able to walk down the high street and being able to find something that actually might quench your hunger, but is actually good for you, is not processed, is not something that's been, you know, frozen, deep fat fried, and then thrown in, you know, polystyrene or something like that to eat. And of course, I mean, I generalize, there are obviously good options as well, but the majority of the food that is presented to us as consumers is processed food. Any way you look at it, even if you look at you know, chicken breasts, for example, you'll buy them and you'll think to yourself, well, chicken breasts aren't processed, but they are. You know, they've been taken from the bird, they've been cleaned, there's all different types of things happen. Hopefully, you know, you guys are kind of eating more organic things, but the worst case scenario is that your chicken meat has been, you know, bleached and kept in environments of, you know, low temperatures for a long period of time, so that no bacteria is growing on them, so that they can have a longer shelf life. Maybe sometimes they've been injected in with saline solution, so that, you know, it puffs up the weight of the chicken breast, and also helps to keep that breast, again, from getting bacterial infections and stuff. You know, it's the same, really. I mean, it's a similar sort of story for a lot of the fruit and vegetables that we eat as well. You know, they've 9 times out of 10, especially if they've come from abroad, they've been kept in a chemical environment or chemical induced environment that is sanitary, you know, so that, again, bacteria is not present in the environment, so that it's not able to attach to any deformities on the vegetable. You know, a cut in a pepper and bacteria gets in, it starts to breed because finally it's got something to latch on and eat. So it's really, you know, looking back at how we used to live and how we developed hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and then beginning to look through history at how we would have eaten when there wasn't as much money as around and there wasn't as much food produced, and we didn't have this whole global food ring, basically. I see it as, you know, where food is being produced in one country, sent over to another country to be packed, sent off and exported to another country to be sold and eaten, and then, you know, same thing, then that country's exporting something, it goes to somewhere else to be packed or processed or included into a ready meal or made into whatever, and then, you know, and then finally arrives on somebody's plate, and you sort of think, oh, lovely, well, that was a chicken, you know, that was a chicken breast, but actually it's gone through 10 days of processing before it's arrived as a chicken breast on your plate. There's a lot to think about, but if you just take the history and you think about, actually, before, when we were doing it all for ourselves, when we had to grow our own plants and vegetables and fruits, and we had to eat seasonally, when we had to rear our own animals, whether they be, you know, cows, chickens, pigs, catch our own fish, whatever, there was a lot less demand on those systems, for one thing. There was a lot more care taken and love taken to make sure that these plants, these fruits, these animals survived through to culling, you know, through to cutting, through to culling, through that, so that they would be able to feed the whole family and be able to be kept and dried, or, you know, whatever process. Different cultures have different processes for the way of keeping meats for longer periods of time and really utilizing the whole animal. And it really gets you thinking about, actually, back in those days, you know, somebody would have reared a cow from a calf to the point of being, you know, 18 months old, for example, fully grown, and able to be slaughtered to feed half the village. And that calf would have been looked after, it would have been tended to independently, it would have been, you know, one man, one calf type thing. It would have been taken for walks, it would have been exercised, it would have been, you know, given the cream of the crop of where to eat, no fertilizers, no growth hormones, nothing like that, you know, no chemical stimulation at all. And it really matters. You know, it really matters in terms of the food that we eat and the nutrition. All of that matters. The amount of energy that you put into something, you know, you get out what you put in. We've discussed energy before. And again, how it transposes into things. So if you're showing something care and you're showing something love, then that thing feels looked after and it feels safe. Therefore, there is no flight or fight response in its body. There is no adrenaline coursing through the veins of the beast. And so that adrenaline then isn't going into the flesh of the beast. And actually the beast is pretty happy until just the moment before it dies. And then it suddenly realizes something bad's going to happen. And that's it. But even then, you know, ancient traditions would have slit the throat. Well, the cow would never have known that until literally the second that that was done. So there would have been, again, no stress, no nothing. Whereas now animals are kept in such a way where, you know, for the majority anyway, they're kept in such a way that there is almost constant stress, and that permeates into the meat. Obviously, it goes into when we're stressed, it goes into every cell of our body. There's absolutely, you know, no reason to think that it's any different for any other living thing on this planet. We all work the same. We all have the circadian rhythms. We all have the fight or flight response, you know, like animals and birds and all those sorts of things. We have that get me out of here, you know, quickly response. And it requires certain things to be produced so that we can get out of there quickly. You know, in our case, it's, you know, this huge adrenaline burst that makes us move quickly. It's the same for animals. It's the same for birds. You know, we've all got this going on. So it's important to recognize this when you're thinking about nutrition. When you are thinking about your own nutrition and you're thinking about the way that we used to eat, you recognize that actually probably meals would have been more intermittent and they would have been a lot smaller, literally down to the fact that food was not readily available everywhere. Food would have been looked after as much as possible. Food would have been eaten more quickly, straight from, for example, the field to the plate. You know, we had a lot more of a healthy way of living whereby, you know, you would go and pick a lettuce, for example, and then bring it back onto the plate and wash it and give the lettuce out. You know, you pick it straight out the ground when you needed it. You keep it as fresh as you possibly could for as long as you possibly could. Pull it out the ground, take the leaves off, serve and eat. And that would have been it. Now the lettuce is picked, like I say, sort of 5-6 days before it even gets into the shops. And it's kept in an environment that, you know, just really holds it in suspension. But it doesn't, you know, it doesn't detract from the fact that now that plant has been picked, now that plant is in a dying process, and that's what we're eating. So again, having a think about how it is that we eat and how much we consume is a great place to start when you're thinking about fasting, because there's a lot of stuff about fasting on the internet. If you start looking through the internet, if you start looking through the health journals and the books, there's a lot of sort of pros and cons, and it seems to be determined really by the level of sense, if you like, the level of logic and the level of spirituality. I'm going to say it as well, like bringing spirit, bringing consciousness into the fast helps in a number of ways, which I'll get onto later. But what fasting really does is actually brings your consciousness into your eating for perhaps the first time for some people. You know, majority of us are brought up with mum and dad serving 3 meals a day and probably snacking in between because, you know, we're a bit peckish or we're a bit bored or whatever. And you can face those issues around eating and how much you eat by looking at the emotional connection that you have between food and your hormonal state or your energy state or your emotional state or your mental state. You know, just like look at those things and think, actually, if it's, you know, if it's you're menstruating, for example, for women, there will be certain times of the month where you might feel more drawn towards the chocolate bar, you know, or drawn towards binge eating. Other people won't feel that at all, and they'll feel like, actually, I just don't want to eat anything. It's literally so independent on what's good for you and what's good for your body. But one thing that has been proven is that there are a lot of benefits to fasting, and not just in terms of your physicality, but also in terms of your mental health, your emotional health, because fasting helps to govern your hormones. Fasting helps certain hormones from not being overproduced. And it really, you know, opens up a whole world of being able to control your emotions, being able to control your energy levels, being able to influence and boost your mental health and your mental clarity, as well as the energy that you feel in yourself physically. So I started fasting at the beginning of this year, knowing that I was going to be doing this at some point, because I wanted to talk on this for a while. Knowing I was going to be doing this, I've started fasting once a week for 24 hours since the beginning of January. So since the first week of January. So we're now at the end. And the benefits that I've noticed, again, I haven't been journaling on this one, but I've been very mindful of each day and just kind of really noting the things that I've changed. Now, in the time between my first fast and this fast, I've done a lot of periodic fasting. I did fasting in a Vipassana, in a silent retreat that I did in Thailand for 10 days, where we were only allowed to eat at 6:30 in the morning and at 1:30 in the afternoon, and then that was it. We had a drink in the evening at 6 o'clock, but that was it. And I noticed I lost a lot of weight. I felt very lethargic in the afternoon for the entire time. And yet I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, every morning when the bells were sounding, wide awake, like ready to go. And it just seemed that my body clock sort of shifted back again. So in the afternoon, when it technically for me, in my normal life, if you like, would have been kind of about 5, 6 o'clock, and the sun should have been setting. My body clock was still responding like that, although, you know, and still saying, okay, well, if you're going to miss this meal, that's fine, but you're tired, you need to rest. And I found the rest of the day kind of dragged until it was time to go to bed, and I was just straight in bed. But come 4 o'clock in the morning, boom, straight awake, not hungry, but really, really awake, real energy and feeling good, and no lethargy getting out of bed, actually straight up and washing teeth, washing hair, cold water shower, you know, not speaking about anything with anybody, very much just kind of being in the moment, being very quiet, but really noticing that come breakfast time, I was ready for breakfast. I felt hungry. I felt like actually I need to feed. And then come lunchtime again, starving. But once lunchtime was done, that was it. After like day 3, my body was just like, okay, well, you're not getting anything else, so you might as well just kind of give up on the idea of it, that it's coming. And I began to control the mental urges that were coming in for me. You know, that usual pattern of shouldn't I be having dinner was just suddenly kind of let go. No, dinner's not on the cards, so you kind of let it go. So that was on day 3, because I did journal through that Vipassana. And so, yeah, so I've done periodic fasting through that, through the vegetarian festival. Also, when I have felt like I'm beginning to get too lethargic. I know that my practice, for example, in my yoga has become almost resigned. I need to change it up a little bit. I'm doing the same sort of stuff every day, and I'm not really stretching myself. When I know that I need to give it a little boost and I need a little bit of energy to do that, often I will practice a fast then, where I'm eating at around sort of 11 a.m., eating at around 6 p.m., and then that's me done. Again, taking it back to 2 meals a day, and that's me done. And I found that that really works. That's every day. So that's like 5 days a week. And then on the weekend, I just kind of eat with the family and just eat as and when. And I've never really been like a massive snacker between meals. I'm not the sort of person that would take fruit with them or anything like that. I kind of stick to my 3 meals a day. But when I cut it down to 2, I feel like my energy levels increase, my focus increases, and the weight of my body decreases. So although my strength remains the same, because of the lightness in my stomach, it's easier to kind of breathe because of the lightness in my stomach and the least, like, you know, the lesser amount of things in my stomach. Because obviously, you know, your stomach, the lower intestine and the upper intestine, the tracts go on for meters and meters and meters. So food is kind of always in there unless you do a little bit of fasting and begin to kind of break that down so it becomes smaller. So it can always be engorged. It can always be you know, overextended, if you like, if you're constantly sort of stuffing until the point of really feeling full. And I think that's another good point to bring up, is that actually looking at your diet and looking at how you eat, remember that actually it's not the case of feeling full that means it's time to stop eating. It's actually a case of portion control and looking at the amount that you should be eating as a person of your size and your structure. So whether you're male or female really matters. Whether you are sort of a thinner person or a more heavy built person really matters. And this is stuff that Ayurveda has taught me. And also your dosha as well. And that's where the kind of the size of you comes into account a lot as well. So all those sorts of things make up for, you know, being able to really consider your diet and work out what would be best for you. But fortunately, fasting is really one of these things that is open to everybody and open to interpretation. So we see a lot of, so I've spoken about the vegetarian festival in Thailand. We also have Ramadan in southern Thailand. There's I think it's 50% of the population in southern Thailand is Muslim. So we have these Muslim festivals, and Ramadan lasts for between 28 and 30 days. And the idea is that you don't eat within the hours that the sun is up. So generally speaking, you'll see people dashing out at around sort of 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Sun comes up regularly at 6:30 and goes down regularly at 6:30. So you've got that 12-hour period of the day that you're not allowed to eat for. And some people even abstain from drinking water. obviously people, young children, pregnant women, anybody with any serious health condition doesn't usually partake, and they're not looked at any differently for it. But, you know, it's interesting to watch because everybody kind of dashes out first thing in the morning and they'll eat a massive, massive breakfast to get them to go through. And you can see them at all these stalls and they're stuffing big plates full of food and eat, 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 eat. And then once the sun comes up, they disperse, they get on with their day. Energy levels do lower. We have staff who practice Ramadan every year, and you could always tell when they're on Ramadan because they just kind of sit around halfway through the day. It just becomes very, very hot, and it's just a bit too much. You know, energy levels are low, especially towards in the first couple of weeks. It feels like the effort is at its biggest. At his biggest test, and then towards the end, you know, they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, I think, is one thing, but also they've gotten into it, they've gotten used to it, and they're beginning to be a little bit, you know, freer, a bit more lighter, and it's quite interesting to watch. But you can always tell when they're on Ramadan because there's a lot more control. And then come 6:30 in the evening, suddenly the world is alive. Everybody's come out of their houses, they're on the streets, they're buying the food, they're sitting there eating with friends, they're, you know, literally breaking fast at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening. And it, you know, there's a real buzz about it as well. Not only have they survived that 12-hour period, and they feel really proud of themselves, but there's also a big community thing about it. There's a big sort of community feeling of everybody coming together at the end and celebrating how well everybody's done, because each person has experienced this fast on their own. It's set them on, like it did for me when I cut off from meat for the first time. It set them on a journey of self-discovery, of recognizing what it is perhaps that they need to face, and some of the routines or the habits that, you know, that they've got into that perhaps don't serve them anymore, or don't serve them as they believed beforehand. So there's a lot of kind of clearing of stuff goes on in these times. And again, as you begin to lift the weight out of your body through digesting foods, and especially meats because they're so heavy, you really do begin to see that people feel lighter in themselves. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, good stuff going on internally for them as well. People are beginning to lose that extra bit of weight that they've been carrying. You know, you can see that they kind of have a little bit more energy, and the science that backs this up is that, you know, when you fast, your body is called to use the fat reserves that it's been stocking up day after day after day, because you've given your body the idea that actually food is hard to come by, must eat, must eat, must eat. And so your body inadvertently stores an amount of fat in, whether you're on a diet or not, it stores it due to conditioning from your mind, due to behavioral habit. So depending on the lifestyle that you lead, and depending on your religious beliefs and where you were born and all that sort of thing in the world, you would have been brought up with an idea of what it is to eat and how food should be either celebrated or used as a nutrient, or a little bit of both, hopefully. And, you know, you'll grow up with the idea that you have to have your 3 meals a day, or maybe you have to have 2, or maybe you have to have 6, or, you know, whatever it is. And at one point of the year, we abstain from it almost completely. And you know, and it's a big, big challenge, but we all get through it together. And that's one of the beauty things I think about this sort of thing. You know, I mean, I used to love Ramadan, just watching everybody. And you know, again, for me, people watching is one of my favorite pastimes. And so, yeah, for me, it was fascinating to watch and to see the difference in the 4 weeks of how people generally behaved, and how much energy and how much happier and healthier they looked in themselves as well. So there is Ramadan, and there are actually there's a few religions that practice fasting and that have practiced fasting for a long period of time. And of course, there's, you know, messages from the Bible about abstaining from food so that you can really pray and allow God to pass through you. Was one of the things I think that Jesus said before they broke their fast at the table before his death, was, you know, that actually if we're really going to serve, then we should abstain from eating, which I think, again, for me, that to me is just about really conserving your energy, allowing yourself to be more pure, allowing your energy to be directed in such a sense that you can then go out and heal others. It's about transference. It's about taking something out that can waste your energy so that you can be the perfect vessel for serving and for healing and for supporting and nurturing and all those sorts of things. So, you know, let's just go over a little bit of biology to begin with. Whenever you ingest anything, your body sends the majority of its energy down into your stomach to be able to digest this. So the stomach is kind of crunching and moving around foods, exhibiting, like, you know, you're letting go of enzymes. It's producing more bile. It's producing more. We're using more water. The food then gets kind of broken down and then pushed down into the intestine, into the upper intestine, which then again begins to kind of squeeze and get all the nutrients out of all the food that you're taking in. And as that kind of squeezes, so it moves the food down the tube as well. Different enzymes are released at different points. Those enzymes help break down the food, release the nutrients. This is then absorbed into the blood system. That then carries around to each of the cells, and the cells are then fed. So it's quite a big deal for your body to process this food. And as you can imagine, depending on the purity of the food, if you like, depends on the amount of work that your body's got to do. Because if you're taking on board a lot of salts in your food or a lot of sugars in your food, that's a lot more stuff for your body to have to break down. If you are, and also you use a lot more water through breaking down sugars and salty sort of foods. If you're taking on board more pure foods, more healthy foods, there's actually a lot less for your body to do because there's no kind of releasing of chemicals to balance out. There's no, it's literally absorbing of goodness, and then the roughage passes down quickly and easily into the digestive system and out for elimination. There's, again, keeping hydrated all the time as well, drinking enough water, especially if you are eating huge amounts of kind of salty or sugary foods, or the majority of your food that comes in is salty or sugary. You need a lot of water to be able to flush that through. You need a lot of water to be able to keep the amount of food that you digest as well in a state whereby it can be easily manipulated and squeezed, if you like, by the upper intestine. If you don't have enough water, then essentially you're sending dry foods down into your stomach, which, as you can imagine, you can only squeeze a little bit. It's literally, I mean, the physics on it is not hard to understand. But if the food that you are eating is in big bulks, like, for example, red meat is, and maybe you're eating a massive steak and you eat it and it goes down through your stomach and into your intestine, that's going to take a long time to break down, just because of the nature of the fabric of the food. It's thick. It's, there's a lot to break down in terms of breaking down flesh. Is huge. It requires a lot of enzymes. It requires a lot of moisture. It requires a lot of effort through the stomach as well. And it requires a lot of time. It will move more slowly. And it takes, I think it's around 3 days to get the steak kind of through from your stomach into your bowel. So that gives you an idea of how much energy then you're using up over those 3 days on just one piece of food from your mealtime, from your plate. Obviously, the lighter foods like vegetables and fruits and those sort of things is not quite so traumatic, if you like, for the body. They don't need as much energy to be able to process them, and the density of nutrients and vitamins that are held in them is a lot greater. But having said that, they go through you a lot more quickly. You're much more likely to kind of feel hungrier more quickly than you are if you're still processing a great big steak. And really this conversation is not about, your eating patterns. It's just about enlightening you. It is about eating patterns, but it's not about what you eat specifically. It's more about enlightening you and opening up a conversation for you about how it is you eat and the amount that you eat, and whether or not you could adjust those two things to be able to function better with your immune system, to be able to lower cholesterol and blood pressure, to be able to move out of the high risk category of diabetes. That I think it's like 30% of the population are predicted to be in like a diabetic state or at high risk from diabetes by 2025. They're astounding figures. 30% of the population, well, this is in the West, specifically America, but that's huge, and it's not just down to down to food that you're eating, but it's down to lifestyle, it's down to lack of exercise, You know, if you're not burning off any of these sugars and stuff that you're taking in as well, then they remain in your blood. They affect your insulin production. And again, it's when you think that you're drinking something and you're having a drink and it's a big Coca-Cola, and you think that effectively a can of Coke is pretty much its own weight in sugar. You're not taking in any water. You're taking in a minimal amount of water, a certain amount of water that won't even be enough to process that can of Coke. Wouldn't even be enough for that. It might feel thirst quenching because you have given the message to your body and to your brain that drink is coming in. But actually, once it begins to process it, it doesn't recognize it as something as useful, for example, as water. It actually has a lot to do with processing. There are chemicals in that drink. There's a huge amount of sugar, obviously the caffeine. And, you know, it's really about opening up the dialogue and the conversation about what it is we eat and how it is that we eat. So there are a few things that you can do. And I wanted to kind of start off with making it easy for us to even consider regularly fasting, because perhaps in your mind fasting is going to be this big kind of abstinence of food that would throw you into some kind of turmoil, you know, whether it be just can't get my head around not having breakfast, lunch and dinner, just can't think about reducing the amount that I eat. So there are a number of different ways of fasting that I kind of want to discuss. And some of them, you know, are a lot more easily done than others. And again, like I said, you know, with my traveling experiences, some days, you know, life just takes over and you end up missing a meal. You end up skipping something. If you get up late and you've got to get your train, you know, you haven't got time for breakfast. So you'll grab an earlier lunch, for example, and you've missed that meal. But actually, if you miss breakfast and you've gone from the night before, you might have already fasted for 12, 14, 16 hours by the time you get food in. So instead of feeling like, oh God, I missed breakfast, that could be an opportunity for you to be, okay, brilliant. I've done like 16 hours of fasting. Well, that's going to be better for my digestive system. And instead of complimenting yourself and congratulating yourself with a massive, great big blowout, then work on the back of that and intake a small meal next, full of protein, so that, again, it gives your body a little bit more time to, you know, carbohydrates tend to go through your system quite quickly. Protein takes a while to digest. So if you're eating eggs, beans, anything like that, then, you know, that's the sort of meal that you would want at the end of any period of fasting. Something that actually is going to take your body a while to sort of digest it and push it through, but that is still effectively a whole foods meal, and that has a great deal of nutrient that you're sending in. You know, if you have that, don't take it as like, oh, what a negative, I've really missed breakfast. Take it as a positive, but actually, okay, in which case, today's going to be my fasting day. I'm going to try this out. And you can then just have a smaller lunchtime meal and then resume eating normally at the same time, you know, at the same time that you usually do. And you can take that opportunity. So, you know, just begin to think outside the box a little bit. Begin to think about how you could perhaps try this out for yourself and experience the numerous benefits that are aligned with fasting. So one of the ways that as well that, you know, might make it easier to kind of get your head around is you don't always have to fast and abstain from food completely. You can have protein rich, again, ideally, but you can have snacks throughout the day. Try not when I say snacks, I don't mean a packet of crisps or a candy bar or anything like that. You know, I'm really talking, if you need something, have something like, you know, a handful of peanuts, for example, or almonds or cashew nuts or something like that. Something that actually is going to, you know, allow you to abstain from a full meal, but equally at the same time fill you up just a little bit, give you something for your stomach to kind of latch onto so that you don't begin to drive yourself mental with it. Because, of course, with hunger comes, you know, mental distraction. As your body begins to sort of say, no, you should be eating by now. You should have done this by now. What's going on? You know, and so, you know, you can begin to distract the body by having these things in place, bringing with you stuff that you might like to eat, protein-rich things that you might like to eat, a boiled egg, for example. You know, just have it in, you know, a little container or something like that you can then peel the skin off when you're ready to eat it. And if you're really, really hungry and you've got 2 hours left before you can actually have lunch, then just, to quickly eat a hard-boiled egg, for example, will give your stomach and your body as much as it needs to carry on until you have a chance to have a proper full healthy meal. The other thing is not to have like a massive blowout meal on the end of it. So not only just the foods that you eat, but the quantity that you eat, the amount that you eat. It's important to keep portion sizes small with every meal that you have. I wouldn't say that the majority of food that's served up to me in the UK is a small portion or, anything. Like, they're far more interested in giving you a massive plate of food and charging the earth for it than they are giving you a reasonable sized plate of food for a reasonable price. And so, basically the food is not worth the money that you're paying for it. So they'd rather give you more so that you get like that value for money feeling. Instead of actually giving you a smaller portion of what you need, but better quality foods. It's coming. I do see a lot of things changing, but certainly for the majority of places, certainly in the UK anyway, and I've really found this coming home, is everything is deep fried, everything is processed. Even when you're going to some of, what I would call like the nicer restaurants, you can tell that, a lot of this stuff has either been sitting there, it hasn't been made fresh. The sauces and stuff like that in pasta restaurants have been made, perhaps 2-3 days before, if not vatted in. It's worth feeling into that and just making smaller meals your go-to. And that can be a way of beginning the intention to fast. It's just actually cutting out the amount of stuff. Still have your meat and your veg and all that sort of stuff, if you eat meat, on your plate. Just make it a little bit smaller. Just make it just a little bit smaller than you would normally have and begin to ease into that so that you begin to prepare. You're beginning to set your intention and you're beginning to say, this is actually something I'm going to be doing, and I'm going to do myself a favor now, and I'm going to cut down on my portion sizes so that actually when I do go without a meal, I'm not missing a huge, great big meal that I would have, tucked into and enjoyed. I'll actually just be missing kind of a reduced rate meal, if you like. And it somehow clicks in the psyche that you're not missing out on so much. It's better like that. If you can reduce it down, it would be a lot easier for you. So that's like a little way that I do anyway of setting my intention to fast, is to just really cut down on the amount of food that I'm eating on the run up to my fast, so that I don't feel like I'm missing out so much when it comes to abstaining. So there's a few little things that I found out about fasting, really the ways that we can fast. But one of the things that I think I kind of wanted to give you before we go through the basics of that is how it can really affect you in terms of personal connection for yourself. And again, I found this out through my Vipassana at the monastery when it was all about meditation. And I realized that by calming my stomach, so I calmed my mind. By calming the energy that I was spending digesting things, I released energy from other places of my body, and that affected my mind and my emotions. So I didn't feel at all upset or emotional throughout the time that I was in this Vipassana. I felt very calm. Again, it was after day three, and I think 75% of the people that had turned up for it had gone. 50% of them went in the middle of day two. And then it kind of got up to 75%. And by day 5, we were left with, I think it was like 55 people or something like that, which started off from 170, I think 180, something like that. So, it does play with your mind. And there's a lot of factors into this. But it also allows you to really watch your mind and watch how you process things and what you make things mean to you. And as you begin to detach from the food and the energy levels begin to rise and the exhaustion levels begin to low and all the different systems of the body are getting a little bit of a break because they're not constantly having to work and do things. Remember that, right, as well. Remember that your circulatory system isn't having to carry as much, because the more stuff you bring on board, the more it's got to transfer stuff around. Your digestive system isn't having to do as much. You're even like things like your breathing and stuff like that. When your diaphragm is lowering down and it hasn't got the miles of, tubing and the inflamed stomach and, all those sorts of things, makes it a lot easier to move. as your body weight lightens, it's a lot less pressure on your joints and on your back, and on really like your muscles as well, on your knees and your ankles, those sorts of things as well, as you begin to lighten your body, so you begin to release the tension around there and allow them to do their job kind of a little bit more easily, so that it does actually help pretty much all of the systems of the body. I mean, it's fascinating when you think about it. When you think about taking food in as energy, and you recognize that actually you need to use energy to process that energy, it makes perfect sense that after a massive meal like Christmas dinner, for example, you might have what we call in the UK, like a digestive slumber, where you just sit there and you're like, oh, that is me, comatose now. I'm good for nothing else other than sitting in front of a James Bond movie. And yet, when you fast and you restrict the amount that you're taking in, and everything gets lighter, you do feel lighter, and you do feel more in touch with the world. I think as your energy levels rise, as your vibration rises, you begin to feel more in touch with those other high vibration parts of our world. So going out for walks and stuff like that can bring immense joy, whereas before you might have just trudged around trying to get through your walk. Now suddenly you're feeling lighter, you're lighter in step, you're lighter in body, you're looking around, you're more alert, you're able more with the sounds and the sights and the feelings that are all around you, and that can be a really beautiful experience as well, to be able to actually almost come out of the body and view everything from this heightened sense of awareness. It's really fascinating. And please, if you've had any experience of fasting and you'd like to comment on any experience that you've had, do comment away now if you'd like me to read it out, or do send me a message after the show as well. I'd be really interested to see. But like I say, fasting has been around for years and years and years. It's been practiced in a number of different religions. So I just wrote out a few things about the way it's practiced within religion. So, okay, well, religious fasts. According to the health and the effects of religious fasting have been the subject of scientific inquiry, with most of the research being performed in the last 2 decades. The following religious fasting periods are featured in this review, and this is from the Medical Journal. Islamic Ramadan, 3 principal fasting periods of the Greek Orthodox Christianity, which is Nativity, Lent, and Assumption. I didn't even know what Assumption was. And the biblical-based Daniel fast. These were included in this study that they did because they're the only, including that is to our knowledge that these are the only fasts about which scholarly research has been performed that explicitly detail the subject's dietary intake and health-related outcomes. So over the course of time, these 3 different religions have actually documented the effects of the fast on their congregations, and they've actually written down and looked at the way people are responding, and looked at the foods that they're eating, and looked at how they've come across through that, how they've been able to communicate more effectively. Okay, I've had a question come through. I'm interested in the fasting, but I'm worried about the consequences. A friend of mine did a fruit fast, but all he did was melons, and he passed out while driving. Luckily, he's okay, but do you have suggestions on how to plan this correctly? I have a family, and I would like to do it with all of us. Okay, great. Wonderful question. Thank you very much. One of the things I would suggest initially is starting slowly. Okay, like I say about starting with portion control. If you start with portion control and just serving up less, then gradually you begin to kind of disconnect from this idea of having a great big meal, which can be very, very appealing at the end of a fast. The other thing is, if you're with your family, like so with my children, the way I introduced fasting with my children was to allow them to become aware of the fact that we fast naturally overnight. So we'll have dinner at, say, 7 o'clock in the evening, and they will have breakfast at 7 o'clock the next day. And it's like, guys, you're already fasting. You have your dinner, you're all done, you'll have a little drink before you go to bed, and then you fast for 12 hours until you've got up and you've got yourself dressed, and then we have breakfast. So you're already fasting. If you wanted to extend that by, a couple of hours, for example, and go from a 12-hour to a 14-hour fast, that might be something that you could do with them all on a weekend, because again, you probably would get up later on a weekend, and then you could really kind of bring a conscious awareness into it, like, No, Leo, you've done 14 hours fast today. This is going to be easy. We're going to be able to do this. Is going to be fine. And again, it's the same thing with leading in partners, leading in families, you know, extended families like parents and stuff like that. When I first started talking to my mum, she was very much, you know, she's very much a breakfast person. She loves her breakfast. And she, you know, I asked her if she could skip breakfast or hold it off for a couple of hours. She's like, well, I'd be starving. What would I do? And as I began to reflect to her back as into, you know, well, maybe if you did something else in that time, filled that time with something else, then actually you'd be distracted enough not to even realise, particularly that it was breakfast time. And my mum's very much a person of routine. You know, she every morning she gets up, she makes a cup of tea, she takes it back to bed, she sits there and wakes up for another sort of half hour while she's sipping her tea and perhaps reading a book or something like that. So to give her that idea that actually if she got up, she could make her cup of tea, or she could, you know, ideally nothing with milk, because again, it's kind of got protein in it. But, you know, she could start the day with a green tea, or, you know, a herbal tea or something like that. Or a tea that doesn't have, like, you know, the proteins in it as well. You know, have black tea, have a lemon tea, something like that. And then if she just had that and carried on reading her book for an extra hour without feeling like she had to get up and go and have breakfast at a certain time, how would that make her feel? I agree with you about being worried about the consequences through fruit fasting. Now, a lot of the fruit fast that I've read about lasts up to 72 hours, which is 3 days, which for me is a long time to be surviving on something that are not complex foods. They are the majority water, some level of sugar, especially with fruit, which often can keep you energized for a certain period of time, but then promotes a big drop in body sugar. Which creates lethargy again, and may well have contributed to passing out while driving, because that's a severe dip in blood sugar levels can cause you to faint. And I have low blood sugar, and I experienced that a lot as a child if I didn't manage my eating correctly. And I would just, you know, just faint dead away. And of course, as an adult, when you're driving and you're operating heavy machinery, or, you know, even you're just responsible for the rest of the family, you can't be passing out all over the place. So for me, fasting for 72 hours is extreme and should be done really with the guidance of a healthcare professional, you know, with strict times, for example, based on your body, based on your health, as to when you can be having the fruit, if that's the way you want to go, or the snacks, or the protein, however it is that you want to go. But if you're really thinking about doing a 72-hour, it's a big one, and I would definitely go to the doctor first and sort of say, what do you think in terms of my health? How am I overall? And can you suggest, based on my age, based on my glycemic index, based on my BMI, can you suggest anything that would actually help me to manage this the best way I can? And they should be able to, you know, they should be able to tell you that, for example, you know, a woman of my age will have, excuse me, an energy dip around sort of mid-afternoon, depending on what time she kind of got up. It's to do with hormones and stuff like that. So there's general patterns that you can follow. In terms of children and that sort of thing as well, be careful on how you fast with children. They can do it, but be aware that obviously they're growing. Be aware that unless they see, they've really got it. You know, people generally, I think, a general rule of thumb, have to see that it's doing them good before they can really commit to doing without. It's kind of one of those things about human nature. It's almost like before even trying, you have to know that it's going to give you the required outcome. And my curiosity was massively sparked with this when I first started fasting. So for me, it was kind of, you know, that scientific part of my brain started whirring, and I was like, well, I'm just going to see. I'm going to see if what they're doing is actually going to work for me. You know, it's kind of that idea. But at the same time, you know, you can do fasting as well, where you do only 1 day a week. That's what I've been doing since the beginning of the year, fasting just 1 day a week for 24 hours. So I'll have my evening meal at around sort of 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening. Excuse me. And then I won't eat anything until the following evening at around sort of 6:30, 7 o'clock. And that's when I will eat a small protein-based meal. I'm vegan, so it tends to be like tofu, or it might be something like I'd have a bit of quinoa probably, or what else? Like I have like some beans or something like that, and maybe like a little wrap, you know, something that I might have as a light lunch would tend to be that dinner for that night, just so that I didn't overload my system suddenly with a load of food coming in when it was just beginning to empty. And then really make up after it with, you know, again, with fluids constantly all through the day. If I feel hungry, one of the things I have taken to having is like a turmeric latte or something like that, you know, or golden milk, which is, I use a coconut milk, coconut oil, black pepper, turmeric, cayenne pepper, ginger powder, and then mix it with I put honey, like a teaspoon of honey in the base of, because I don't take, this is my own form of veganism, I don't take honey as being detrimental. I use it as a health supplement only. I don't have it on toast or anything like that. I use it as a health supplement only, but I do have it in my turmeric tea. So I take a teaspoonful of honey, pour in some cold coconut milk on top of that, and then heat up the concoction of all the spices and the coconut oil and the coconut milk in a little pan, and then pour all that in. And if I'm feeling like I'm actually getting really hungry, this is getting hard now, I'll have that, because not only will all the spices begin to kind of fire up the internal systems, but you also get something from the coconut milk. There's a level of kind of, you know, it takes a little bit longer to digest and to pass through your system, for example, than just water. Otherwise, I just tend to drink herbal teas throughout the day, you know, non-caffeinated herbal teas throughout the day. And that tends to, you know, again, a lemon and ginger. Ginger is amazing for cleanses because it stimulates the agni and the digestive fire in your stomach, and that kind of almost gives it something to do. For some reason, it doesn't seem to generate hunger so much as increase the metabolic rate a little bit and push through whatever's in the digestive system already. So that's, you know, something that is great. And if you're feeling like you're getting anxious, feeling like, you know, it's beginning to come a little bit of obsessive in your mind about wanting to eat, and, you know, you've only got an hour or two left or something, you're doing really, really well, but it's beginning to get a little bit, you know, like that now, then chamomile tea is fantastic for just calming the mind, calming the stomach, and really just beginning to kind of let go a little bit of it. Those of you that watch and follow my show regularly will know I'm a big advocate for essential oils as well. And there are some essential oils that you can use to help to calm the anxiety around not eating and really controlling, again, the ego mind, that subconscious mind that is telling you should be eating what you're doing, you should be eating, you know, this is bad for you. All these sorts of negative thoughts can begin to come in. And you can distract yourself with exercise, with going for a walk, something like that. You know, you can distract yourself by, you know, having a bath, having a shower, cooking something for your dinner later on that you would then kind of, you know, could reheat, or cooking something for the next day when you know you'll be able to eat something, you know, big and you know, and it could be something that you'd be able to enjoy. So that distraction is the best form for me of being able to maintain, even when I feel like I could, you know, I want to eat. You know, I've had enough now, I want to eat. And especially when that hangry thing comes in, I found chamomile tea or my turmeric latte or golden milk to be fantastic for just keeping that at bay just a little bit, so that I can carry on. The last couple of hours on any fast for me are the worst, because it's just, unless you're really distracted, unless you're really in the middle of it. And I pick days when I know that I'm going to be really busy. So I'm a yoga teacher and a holistic happiness coach. So between my coaching clients and my teaching clients, there's a lot of dashing around. So I will usually pick one of the days when I'm most busy to do my fast, because then I'm constantly drinking water between classes. I'm constantly talking, I'm occupied, I'm traveling, I'm on to the next person. You know, it's high energy because obviously I'm teaching yoga as well. So although I am depleting my energy, you know, as a teacher, I'm not doing like the full class, I'm guiding other people. So although I am moving, I'm not, you know, really exerting my energy. So those are maybe a couple of ways of being able to kind of help. But I certainly wouldn't jump straight into a 72-hour fruit fast unless I'd taken recommendation from, you know, from somebody who knew, like, you know, a medical professional or a nutritionist, excuse me, somebody who is, you know, trained and experienced in being able to advise on what sort of a fast you might do. One of the easiest ones to do is to just stick to eating within a 12-hour period of your day. That, again, is something that you can very much do easily with the family. You know, you say to the kids, right, we're starting today at 7 o'clock, we're finishing at 7 o'clock, and there's not going to be any kind of weird snacking. We're just going to have our 3 meals. That's it. Just to be able to control that sometimes can be enough. And it's the 5-2 ratio on that as well, where you could do it for the 5 days per week where you're busy, distracted with school or with work and clubs and all those sorts of things. And then on the weekend, you can eat almost kind of as and when you want, and you know, you still get the health benefits. Excuse me. And the health benefits are numerous. So there's fasting has been linked to increased immune system, decrease in inflammation, decrease in cholesterol, decrease in blood pressure, detoxification of cells. So when your body relies on the fat sources that it's stored, what happens is it begins to draw on the fat cells and eliminate the fat cells through conversion of them into energy. And of course, when that's being done, anything that's been held in those fat cells, if you think about cellulite for a second, and you look at, you know, like you might look at the back of your legs, for example, and you think, oh God, you know, getting loads of cellulite, and that's all toxins that's held in the fats and the subliminal layers of your skin. So when you begin to use your legs, for example, while you're fasting, and your body begins to utilize the fat that it's storing, you will begin to burn through those fat cells, and as the fat cells get burnt off, so the toxins get released into the blood, and of course then they're eliminated, and you've got this amazing way of being able to really keep on top of things like cellulite. And again, wherever you know, sometimes you don't see the effects of toxins being held in the fat. There are numerous different places in each individual where we store fat. Fat is adipose tissue, and depending on usually your genetics, depending on the family ancestry, the body that you were born with, you'll find that there are certain places where you're predisposed to collecting fat tissue. It might be, the idea really is that if you think about your body shape, you've got apples, you've got pears, you've got kind of the rectangle shape, you've got like more triangular shapes. They've given it so many different names by now, but if you really think about the way that you are, I'm very much a pear shape. Whenever I put on weight, it goes straight down to my hips and my buttocks and my thighs before anything else, and then it will begin to go, gradually go on everywhere else. But that's my shape, and so pear shape, when I begin to kind of want to lose weight, I know that initially I need to start working around, the places where I have the most adipose tissue, and start really working the bum, the tum, the thighs, because that's where I kind of need to lose it and will have the most amount to lose. Full body workouts, obviously fantastic, but if you want to isolate something, first of all, look at the shape of your body and look at where it is that you collect the fat, work the muscles around that adipose tissue, because that will also help to detoxify you, which will give you more energy, because of course the more toxins you've got in your body, the more your body is trying to process and clean you out all the time. So if your body's trying to clean you out all the time, then it's using a lot of energy doing that, which means that any energy that you want to put into a diet or losing weight has already been taken up by trying to constantly detoxify you. And this is another reason that fasting is fantastic, because if you just take that load off for a minute, then it gives the body a chance to catch up. It gives the body a chance to get on top of it. Rather than constantly running to burn off and burn off and burn off and keep you going, it actually gives it a chance to go, oh, okay, I feel like suddenly I'm being effective. Suddenly this is all beginning to work. And actually I can utilize these fat cells now. I'm not storing anything now. Now I'm utilizing the fat cells, because you can only ever do one or the other. You can only ever store fat or burn fat. Your body can't do anything in between. That's the way it works. It just is the way it works. And so, you really have to consider that, for example, at night, when you're asleep, it's not burning any fat, and it's regenerating cells and that sort of thing. But during the day, when you're exercising, if you're running for the train or you're cycling around or you're going to the gym or whatever, then it will be likely to be burning fat at that time. And so, again, work with the periods of time of your work with the periods of your body when you're going to be most likely to be utilizing it. If you are working out first thing in the morning, for example, and your metabolism is at highest, then if you feed into the muscles with protein rather than feeding into like with fatty, if you're rather than eating fatty foods straight after exercising, then what happens is that the protein gets just digested by your body. It goes out to the muscle mass and builds the muscles. Whereas anything, even if they're healthy fats, and carbohydrates get transferred into sugar, which then become fat when they're not burnt off because you've stopped your exercising. You needed the carbohydrate almost before you exercised. Now you've stopped doing that and you need the protein to build into the muscle mass. Excuse me. So working with the body, working with the processes of the body and being mindful of all these things as well can really help to keep your focus on point for fasting, because initially it very much becomes about kind of mind over matter. Why am I doing this? Another thing that I've helped myself to do it was to take my weight the morning before and the morning after a fast. And I've noticed the great, such varying differences of weight distribution from weight loss, or weight change, as little as sort of 2 pounds, to 200 grams, as little as that, up to as much as 2 kilos in 24 hours. And it's been dependent really on the exercise that I've done that day and the lifestyle that I've done that day and on the fast that I've done that day. But I've lost 6 kilos in 4 weeks of fasting for 24 hours, 1 day a week. So I've done the ratio of 6-1. I've done 6 days of having kind of a normal but healthy-minded lifestyle, where I'm eating sort of 3 meals a day. And then will be the occasional snacks, but I've tried to keep it healthy. I've tried to keep it to like fruit and vegetable snacks rather than, crisps or biscuits or anything like that. And then 1 day of abstaining from the night before until that night, just having a small meal that evening, and then carrying on the next day as normal. You can then build up from a 6-1 to a 5-2, where you are, and 5-2, you can do 2 different ways. You can have 5 days of not being on a fast at all, and 2 days, and I would separate those 2 days. So maybe a Monday and a Friday, for example, for your fasting days. You can also use the 5-2 ratio of using the 12-hour gap just to eat in for those 5 days. So you only eat between 7 and 7, for example, 5 days a week. And then the other 2 days a week, you can eat as and when you like, and you have the freedom to be able to do that. There are benefits to each one, and I would feel into your lifestyle, feel into what you think, I suppose, is achievable for you. But just like try it, really feel, like I say, feel into it, but I really want you to try it. I don't want you to feel like, oh no, I can't do it. Give it a go. Even if you, for example, wanted to do like an 8-hour fast and you had breakfast, you didn't have lunch, and you had dinner, just something that gives your body the break from constantly processing food. The majority of us will eat for around 14 hours a day, almost constantly. There's always constantly something that the digestive system is having to process in that 14 hours. Now, if you think about that, that's a huge amount of energy that you're using on one thing, digesting food. And we don't need the amount of food that we are eating. We just don't need it. We're gathering weight. Obesity is massively on the increase. We're gathering weight. We are the unhealthiest that we've ever been. And yet lifestyle and food quality and all that sort of thing, but also to do with the amount that we eat. Some of the people who have lived the longest in history have put it down to having simple, light meals of maybe 1 or 2 things on their plate at a time, maybe eating only once a day in some instances. I remember reading about a guy in China, some little backwater town in China, who claimed he was 252 years old. I don't know if you've ever read about this. Like, it might be fake news or whatever. But the claim was made, and the idea that he, or the reasoning that he had this such huge increase in longevity was that he lived a very simple, meager lifestyle where he fished for the majority of his life for the food that he would eat. And he really only ate fish, rice, and a few of the herbs that grew around his house that he planted, and that was it. So he kept fit by walking to and from the river, which was, it was about like a kilometre or 2 kilometres or something from his house. He would spend the majority of the day fishing and relaxing and keeping a very, you can imagine, very balanced mental state. Nothing to stress him, nothing to kind of crisis about, nothing really emotional. He was on his own, he'd been on his own for all of his life. Getting a fish that day and eating and coming back and cooking it all and cooking it with herbs and cooking it with a little bit of, having a little bit of rice with it, but not a lot because, rice would mean that he had to walk into town. So rice was kind of one of these things that he really rationed out for himself. And some days he wouldn't catch anything and he would just have to have the rice and the herbs. But that was, that was kind of his secret to longevity. And when you think about the amount of effort that it takes your body to digest this food, maybe one of the reasons that people are beginning to kind of die so much younger from things like heart disease, which again is, is the biggest killer across the world still, closely caught up by cancer. And that was another thing that I was reading about with fasting, was how it allows them, because the energy comes out of your dietary system, like out of your digestive system, it's able to then go out into all the other parts of your body that might well be suffering and needing that little bit more energy. And cell regeneration was one of those things. So if your body is in perfect health and in perfect balance, then cell regeneration will just happen, just rolls over, no problem at all. But if you're stressed, and this is another thing as well, imagine the majority of us are living in high levels of stress every day of our lives. If you're stressed, the fight and flight hormone kicks in and all the nutrients and everything that have been absorbed goes straight out towards the muscle tissues and into the outer limbs, your arms, your legs, whatever it is, it's going to get where you have a huge rush of blood surging into your mind as well, so you can make quick decisions, not necessarily intelligent decisions, just quick decisions. And that's how we're surviving. That's how we're surviving. And then once that kind of stress comes down a little bit, then more energy can be sent back into the digestive system to carry on digesting the food. Now, if you're staying in a state of stress for, say, 2, 3, 4 hours at a time, you're maintaining that fight or flight response. You're maintaining that adrenaline bursts. You're not digesting at the same rate as you would be if you were calm and relaxed. It can't do everything at once. Our body is absolutely fantastic, super, super amazing. And it never fails to impress me with its logic, with the way everything interlinks so beautifully. But at the same time, and as wonderful as we are only human. There's only so much that your body is designed to be able to do. It's not designed to be able to fight stress, digest perfectly, keep you lean and healthy and fit without, there's degeneration. There's always degeneration. And that's another thing that fasting has been closely linked with, is longevity of life. In the majority of studies that came through with where mice were used, or rats, or animals, or insects even as well, in the majority of those studies, the subjects that were subjected to regular intermittent fasting, so this is like the 6:1, the 5:2 ratios through a period of time, usually about a month, seemed to be standard, pretty much a month, they all experienced longer lifespans than the same, like animals born on the same day as them, from like siblings and all the rest of it. And they lived longer, like by quite considerable lengths of time. I think with mice or something, it was like 2 weeks or something, which you consider how long they live. That's, a huge period of time for them. And so, yeah, it's linked to longevity. And again, I think it's because it gives your body the chance to catch up, to get on top of everything, and actually to come from a place of higher energy states. And when we have higher energy, we have higher vibration. So those vibrations are then carried out through your emotions, through your mental health. Increase in mental health was one of them. Increase in emotional balance was another one. being able to make more intelligent, logical decisions was information that I read as well. You know, it just seems a bit like a no-brainer, really, to actually be able to manage the intake of food and to reap the benefits of it and do that regularly enough so that it's part of your lifestyle, it's part of your diet. You know, this is how I work. I give myself the 5-2 ratio where I eat between 7 and 7 Monday to Friday, and then on the weekends I can do what I want. Or every Monday, for example, I fast from the Sunday night until the Monday night, and I give myself that. You can even take it 36 hours if you want to, and you can miss out that evening meal and just break fast literally on the Tuesday morning. So you can go from Sunday night to Tuesday morning, and there are, you know, increased benefits with that as well. Just do that maybe once a week. Again, it's about feeling into what's right for you. You know, my next step for me with what I'm doing at the moment, the 6-1 ratio of going 24 hours without food for that one day of the week, my next step is to take it over to the following morning. But I want to know, I want to be sensible about it. I want to feel into it. I want to see what comes up over a period of time for me. I want to know that I'll be able to function in my life if I implement this change of lifestyle, right? Something I want to do. I want to try it. I'm curious, apart from anything else now, now that I've read about all these amazing things that fasting can help you do and help you achieve. I'm curious to do it. But I also feel, you know, like I want to ease myself into it. It's almost like building the confidence and, of course, training the subconscious mind so that I don't get so many flare-ups, you know, so many, you know, parts of my mind going, oh, don't you think you should eat? And I have another question come in saying, what is your thoughts on multi-day fast? A friend of mine is thinking of doing a 7-day fast back to back. Okay, so maybe you could give me a little bit more information on what the fast entails. Fasting 7 days back to back with certain amounts of food, maybe 500 calories per day for women, 600 for men. Usually you would only do that for around sort of 2-3 days at a time. So if you could perhaps give me a little bit more information about what this 7-day fast, you know, how it would be structured, I can perhaps comment a little bit more on that. Again, 7 days sounds like a long time to be going without anything at all. I definitely wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't recommend going without food at all for 7 days. You know, I think even if you are snacking a little bit here and there, depends on the food that you're going to snack on as well. Again, he's like kind of the grapefruit diet that became massively popular, didn't it? The grapefruit cleanse, which is essentially what you're talking about, became massively popular in the 80s. But there were huge nutrient deficiencies in the grapefruit. And grapefruit is actually a great cleanser of the digestive tract, but also anything citrus will strip through some of the fine cells in a cell line, like it's like a lining that enables your food to move smoothly through the upper intestine, and the acid and citric acid in anything citrus will begin to burn that down after a while, especially if there's not anything else kind of mixed in there with it. So there's, you know, different things that you want to kind of see. Be water only, no food of any kind. I don't know that I would be. I would like to think that this person has taken some kind of recommendation that is from a serious health professional. 7 days back to back of only water would be intense. I would expect them to feel for probably the first day, first day or two, I would expect them to feel a lot of resistance to it. Maybe the first day you'd be all right, but day 2 or 3, I would expect them to feel resistance. By day 3, 3-4, I would expect them to feel some decrease in their energy. Usually decreases before it gets better, in my experience. You know, usually there's a drop before there's a sudden kind of heightening of energy, if you like. And I would say it depends on the lifestyle that's going to be lived, if you like, throughout that time as well. Like, I would be recommending, if you're going to be doing that you were keeping the sports down to a minimum, maybe some gentle yoga, maybe short distances, gentle walking, you know, in reasonable conditions, not in boiling hot conditions or freezing cold conditions, because both environmental changes really sap the water out of your body. I mean, you can, I really, if I'm honest with you, that would be quite intense. And I don't think I would recommend that to any of my clients. I have recommended fasting, but I've recommended, like I'm saying to you guys now, really, start off slow and ease into it. If this is somebody who is used to doing 72-hour fasts and they've decided that actually I do a 72-hour fast every month, it's cool. I've done it for, 6-7 months now. Now I want to try the big boy and do a 7-day fast. Then, okay, I might be a little bit more fair play, I think it would be hard, but let me know how you get on. But again, definitely get advice from a healthcare or a nutritionist professional, because I think that's pretty intense. To strip your body of nutrients for 7 days is a long period of time. And if it's just water as well, I would want to be looking at only drinking, even then, but only drinking spring water, only drinking, natural water that's come direct from source, nothing from the taps, nothing that's been processed, reverse osmosis, none of that. There's no goodness at all in that. And you need to keep your potassium levels up. You need to keep your magnesium levels up. You need to keep the calcium coming into your body. It gets to the point, if you miss out on all the vital minerals that are in your body, then you get actually cellular damage. And for a long period of time like that, depending on, I suppose, how long, whether it's just going to be a one-off thing. Okay, if you want to just challenge yourself to do a one-off thing and you've taken a week off work and you're just chilling and it's, you're not really going to be exerting yourself too much, but do be careful. And obviously anything like that, it's kind of like going through a period of starvation. You have to ease yourself back into food and into the right types of food. So again, nothing citrus, because you'd have nothing in your stomach. Nothing dairy, because it would be too much to take on board for the body to have to process. Soft cooked fruits and vegetables, high in nutrients, high in fiber, averagey in fiber as well. You want to give the body something, and small meals regularly when you come back into it. So maybe, like a sweet potato, something like that, like a mashed sweet potato, not the skin of a sweet potato, but a small sweet potato, maybe sort of around that sort of size, might be something that you could perhaps begin to start eating. And again, having that with some cooked vegetables, green vegetables would be quite good. I wouldn't go beans. I wouldn't go too much protein straight away. Again, it takes a while to break it down, so that would be a lot for your stomach to contend with straight away. Nut milks, oat milks, those sorts of things might be quite good, but again, make it kind of really, really watery. If you wanted like a porridge or something like that, make sure you get the broken oats so that they're kind of already they're already digested, they're already kind of broken down before you begin to eat them. I think probably that would be intense. That would be really intense. And it's not something that I've had recommended to me, or that is been used as a spiritual way of fasting. Even spiritual fasts, they tend not to last more than about 24 hours. They tend usually to be longer periods of time to really kind of test your motivation. But with, eating allowed, that people being able to eat, it not being absolute abstinence. So that's pretty full on. I'd love to let, if you could let this person know that I'd be interested, I'd love to hear how they get on, or maybe you can kind of comment back on the post, once they've done it, and let me know how they got on. But yeah, that sounds pretty intense to me. So I think my thoughts would be, that sounds pretty intense, and I personally wouldn't recommend it. And I think there are easier ways of getting the benefits from fasting without having to go extreme, and like I say, if you're only going to be taking on board water, for goodness sake, make it the best. Starving yourself is no way to go. And on every single informative thing that I read, as much as it told you about the pros of fasting, it does give you the the cons to fasting. The idea that actually, abstaining from food completely can be, it can be something that you can begin to lean into as a way of control. If you think about anorexia and bulimia, both of them are all about purging and abstinence, purging and abstinence, one way or another, whether you go without completely or whether you bring in anything else. So I just think that's pretty extreme, and I wouldn't recommend it myself. So while we're talking about the potential benefits of intermittent fasting, some of the stuff that I wanted to kind of read off to you guys from, again, healthcare professionals and the medical people, it does sort of say about the health risks of fasting. So we've talked quite a lot about the health benefits and how you can utilize fasting as a method for being able to deplete the fat and the toxins in your body, being able to regulate your blood pressure, being able to lower cholesterol, being able to lower your risk of type 2 diabetes by monitoring and sort of balancing out your insulin levels. Also, it absolutely gives you more energy. I can testify to that personally. Absolutely gives you more energy. Absolutely gives you more mental clarity. I feel like my digestive system gets a kick out of it as well. And I feel like everything that comes in afterwards gets eliminated a little bit more easily. And, like I say, in terms of going without for a while, I think it's kind of good to reset that habit that we've got on eating and the emotions around that as well, the habits, the emotions, the reasons why we might eat the way we do, all that sort of thing as well. So it's a really great self-reflection that you get, great self-reflection process that you go through when you do begin to cut off from a routine of any kind, a habit of any kind. Same thing with, with stopping smoking or, stopping the addiction to the gym or whatever. It's like, why was I so into that? Why was I hanging on to that? What did I make it mean to me? So think through some of those things as well. So the health risks of fasting, according to the UK's National Health Service, our wonderful NHS, there are numerous health risks associated with intermittent fasting. People who fast commonly experience dehydration, largely because their body is not getting any fluid from food. So this is something to remember. We're advised in the UK, I think it's kind of pretty much globally, of the 8x8 rule, which is 8 glasses of water, around 200 mils, 8 glasses of water 8 times a day to keep on top of your hydration. That's, generally speaking, is what they recommend that you should be taking on board for your body. And it differs with size of people and, that sort of stuff. But generally speaking, it's a great rule of thumb to go to. 200 milliliter glasses of water a day, intermittently over the course of the day, keeps you hydrated. You don't have to worry about that too much. However, we also gain a vast proportion of water that we need for our bodies from food, from the content of food. When we break down vegetables, the majority of it is water. When we eat meats, same thing. When we eat pulses and beans, although it tends to be more kind of condensed, again, you rehydrate these foods before you can eat them. If they were completely dry, you couldn't eat them, you couldn't digest them, and you wouldn't be able to get any nutrients from them. So we rehydrate. And as you rehydrate any beans and pulses, if you've ever noticed, they go from being tiny little things like that to like that as well. So that gives you some idea of the amount of water that is absorbed and then we then take into our bodies through the food that we eat. Fruits, again, huge amount of water in fruits. And things like celery, again, I think there's something like 85% water, and the rest of it is kind of a little bit of fiber and a little bit of nutrient. So be aware of the amount of water that you do get in from foods, and adjust the intake of water throughout your fast through tea, like some sort of tea that hasn't got a diuretic like caffeine in it. So through, like I said, ginger tea, a lemon tea, your mint tea, herbal teas like that are fantastic. Some fasts actually say you can drink the tea and coffee, have the tea and coffee, it'll make you feel better, especially in the initial stages. But I would always kind of err on the side of not taking sort of diuretics into the system, simply because of the fact that you will be taking in less water anyway. So don't take a diuretic in, because that's just going to get rid of more water. And of course, caffeine is a diuretic. So just be aware of all that as well. So yeah, so this is one of the biggest risks that the NHS is isolating, is because of dehydration, largely because their body's not getting any fluid from food and they haven't upped their intake of fluid to counteract that. As such, it's recommended that during Ramadan, Muslims consume plenty of water prior to fasting periods. Other individuals following fasting diets should ensure they are properly hydrated during fasting periods. So they're not saying don't do it, but they're saying one of the biggest risks is hydration, because people just don't realise how much water we need and how much we get from our food. If you are used to having breakfast, lunch, dinner and snacks in between fasting periods, can be a major challenge. As such, fasting can increase stress levels and disrupt sleep. So again, this is why I say bring consciousness into your fasting experience. Be aware. Look at your experience as a point of self-reflection. Look at being able to ascertain the relationship that you have with food, and when you detach from that relationship, what you're making that mean to you. You know, if you can become almost an observer on yourself, then when you see stress and you notice stress, you can begin to align it to why, you know, what's happened there. Are you really, really hungry? You know, what are you making that hunger mean to you? You know that you've actually only gone without one meal, and that with the amount of kind of fat or whatever that you're carrying on your body, going without one meal should be perfectly okay for you, right? Because we're going to start small and we're going up. So you're more likely to experience the stress levels in your first fast because it's the unknown. You're also more likely to experience them on longer fasts because of that whole unknown thing again. As your body gets used to fasting, it gets easier and easier. If you then challenge it like I'm going to do, suddenly go into like a 36-hour one, I know that I will experience some kind of, oh, I'm starving, I'm getting really hungry now, around sort of 8:30 at night. So I already know that what I'm going to be doing 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, because that's my sugar dip time, right? So what I'm going to do then is just take an early night that night and say, do you know what? I know this is going to happen. I know what's going to happen because I've done this before and I've had that experience and I know how my body works and I know what my mind then tells me and I know where my emotions then go with this. So what I'm going to do to counteract that and to stay in control and to maintain my stress levels is I'm going to have a nice relaxing bath and then I'm going to go sleep early. And a good night's sleep will do me the world of good. I'll then get up in the morning. I'll be lighter of body. I will have had the rejuvenation of sleep. And, you know, I'll do my exercise and then I'll have my breakfast at the normal time, like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. Job done. I've already made provision. I already know where I'm going. I've looked ahead and I've thought, actually, this could be something that potentially might stop me, might break my fast. So I'm going to put stuff in place to do that. And this is why I say start small, because if you start small, the lessons are smaller but easier to manage and they're fewer. You know, you get fewer. You don't get like a massive long spate of reaction and resistance to what you're doing. Okay, so that can really help as well. So yeah, if you're used to having breakfast, lunch and dinner and snacks in between, fasting periods can be a major challenge. So on the prep, on the way up to it, maybe you could cut out the snacks. You know, maybe you could start thinking that actually I'm just going to cut out all my snacks completely. Then the next thing that I would do from cutting out all the snacks is to making sure that your meals sit within that 12-hour period of digestion, optimum digestion between 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock at night. So you've cut out all snacks and then you finite your eating patterns to be breakfast, lunch and dinner between those 12 hours. Doesn't really matter the ratio. It's just those 12 hours are your high digestive points. After 7 o'clock, your immune system takes, well, actually after 6 o'clock, but after your 7 o'clock, your immune system, your digestive system takes a big dip. Your metabolic rate slows. And so, yeah, you can stop eating then and you'd still be able to kind of keep digesting away on that food if you take it around 7 o'clock. So dehydration, hunger or lack of sleep during a fasting period can also lead to headaches. Now, I would also suggest, on my experience of cleanses, that when toxins begin to be released by your body, which is one of the reasons that we want to do this fast, right? We want to release the toxins from our body. We want to give our livers, our kidneys, our stomachs, our digestive system, our endocrine system, our the purifying systems of our body. We want to give them all a bit of a rest. What that means is when they don't have a massive influx of things to purify, it means they get to then regenerating. And so they get to then be releasing the toxins from the cells that, you know, are around them or within them. When that amount of toxin is released into the system, it then puts pressure on the other organs to sort of over cleanse. And again, that can take energy, and it certainly takes water. Back to being rehydrated. Make sure that you are drinking plenty of water. Make sure, as I said before, that the water that you are drinking is good quality water, not reverse osmosis water. It's got nothing in it. Again, tap water, not unless you absolutely have to. It's got nothing in it apart from kind of chemicals that have been used to purify it. There's very little very pure water in the world. I had a quite depressing conversation with a friend of mine about 2 months ago about the state of the water in the world. Again, that's another show. We won't go into that now, but stay rehydrated. And again, managing through stress and managing through hunger and managing through lack of sleep, you can do with certain homeopathic remedies, essential oils, even a chamomile tea. If you're feeling like, some sort of stress or something like that, have a chamomile tea, use a lavender oil, have a relaxing, bath or something like that, but don't go too hot with it. Go a more kind of tepid bath. And then your body, actually, your skin will absorb some of the water as well. If it's of a kind of a decent temperature, your skin absorbs the water around you as well, and that will help to rehydrate you. So that's why your skin goes kind of funny in the bath as well, because actually it begins to absorb it. The structure of the skin changes to be able to absorb the water on the outside after a while of being submerged into it. So it can also lead to headaches, but I agree, because of the dehydration and also because of the fact that you begin to release toxins and it becomes like a cleanse. So if you've ever done a cleanse, you know that the first couple of days you can experience some of the worst headaches that you've had in a long time. You think to yourself, oh my God, this is doing me like no good at all. This is a nightmare. I don't want to be stuck in this mindset. But again, if you can rest and if you can rehydrate, like properly rehydrate, and again, intermittently, not down a massive bottle of water, but keep going with your 200 milliliters and maybe do an extra sort of 4 glasses over the course of the day. That will actually help with those headaches, and being rehydrated really helps with stress levels and stuff as well. Fasting can also cause heartburn. Lack of food leads to a reduction in stomach acid, which digests food and destroys bacteria. It's true, which is another reason that I suggest that you start slowly and you begin to wean almost your body off of the normal function that it's become used to through the bad habit of constant consuming. Right? So if you begin, like I say, slowly, and you stop the snacks and you leave it at that, and then a couple of weeks later you start eating for between the 12-hour periods, and then and you can do that the 5-to-2 ratio again as well. 5 days where you only eat between 7 and 7, and 2 days when it's whatever, as and when, let life dictate. But yeah, absolutely. If you're if you go straight into a proper sort of serious fast, like a 24-hour fast, without having any of this preparation, then your body is used to receiving a certain amount of food coming into it. And of course, then it's going to start, it gets into a rhythm, doesn't it? It's like, okay, breakfast is at 6, and then lunch is at 12. And then I've got a couple of snacks in between them. So as a pancreas, what I'll do is I'll produce a load of bile, because I know that the bile that I've produced overnight and that's just been sitting there will be used up at 6 o'clock. But I've got a kind of a 10:30-ish snack coming on. So I'll produce a little bit more bile. 10:30 comes, no snack, comes down, and the bile sort of is produced and it sort of sits there. But then it thinks, okay, well, we didn't get that snack, but I've got lunchtime in a minute. Lunchtime comes, nothing comes down. What happens? The bile's overproduced, and suddenly you've got an influx of bile. And then you will have stomach acid. You will have an excess stomach acid because of the way you've previously trained your body, because of the system it's used to using to get you in the best place possible to be able to receive this constant food that's constantly coming into you. So it makes sense, right? So use your, use logical sense, recognize your body, really feel into it, see yourself clearly in terms of the eating patterns that you've gotten into, and note down where it is that you feel you're probably most attached to those eating patterns, for example. Then we've got smelling food. Smelling food, where am I? No, I've lost my thing now. Yeah, smelling food can often help to kick in as well the bile production, if you like, because again your stomach goes, hey, something's coming. So if you can, try and keep away from kind of smelling food and being in the vicinity of food if you're experiencing heartburn. A lot of people don't experience it. You know, a lot of people, you know, they're eating too much, but they're not eating massive amounts. And it's really the amount of food that really heavily affects the amount of bile that you produce for your stomach. So there's a lot of studies to say that fasting is very good for you, and there's a few things that really for me are, you know, concerns that need to be raised. They need to be vocalized. We need to have this conversation. You need to recognize how it is that your body works and how it is that it takes what it needs from what we give it. So water is the main thing that your body is looking for in anything that it consumes. It's the first thing that comes out of everything that you put in your mouth, and it goes down to your stomach. So it's drawing the water from everything primarily. As a rule of thumb, generally, use the 8x8 rule. 8 glasses, around 200 millilitres like that of water a day to keep yourself hydrated. And if you are doing any type of cleanse or fasting, please increase that again. So I would say, you know, if you're doing 8, take it to 12. You know, increase it by that much. Increase it by half again. It's not too hard, actually, over the course of like 12, 14-hour day, you know, and more in some people's cases, to be able to drink that sort of amount. But don't make it like pints and pints of water. God, I've forgotten to do my last 2 glasses. No. Just pick up where you've forgotten. Drink your 200 millilitres, leave it for an hour or something, and then perhaps drink another half again, leave it for half an hour, half again, you know, and begin to catch up like that. If you have a massive influx of water in your body, it just sort of flushes all the way through, and you'll find that you're going to the toilet without actually absorbing too much of it. So be aware of that. But otherwise, I wholly encourage fasting as part of a healthy lifestyle. I've found numerous benefits. I've lost weight. I've felt more energy. My skin's gotten better. My eyesight's gotten better. I've noticed that, right? So at the end of last year, I had an eye test. And basically, because coming to about this, it's about here, actually, I find that my vision begins to go blurry. I don't know if you can see that. It's about here. Right? I'm actually now kind of able to come to about here before my eyesight gets blurry. The distance has changed, I think, by about 6 inches, which for me is massive. Now, I haven't changed anything else in my lifestyle apart from doing this once a week fast. So I'm going to carry it on, and I'm going to see if I can't just kind of get to here and be able to read clearly as well. But on the other sort of, you know, things that I've found that I've noticed is my breathing's become easier. I mean, I do a lot of breath work, so that's been quite a surprise to me. And the other thing that I noticed was that my family have just experienced a cold. You know, we get them this time of the year, January in England, you're going to get a cold. My son got it first. It lasted for 5 days with him. My daughter got it, lasted for 3 days with her. And then I picked it up and kicked it in about 18 hours. I was sneezing, got up one morning and I knew I'd caught their cold. I was sneezing throughout the day. I had done my fast the day before, but I was sneezing that day, kept my fluids up, kept drinking, not having any dairy or anything like that, sort of standard, but also went to bed earlier that night. The next day, completely gone, like completely gone. I would expect normally in my health, like the way my body works, is if I'm sneezing that period of time in the day, I know that I'm getting a proper cold that's going to come up into my eyes, that's going to block me up, that I'm going to be, you know, really kind of snotty for a good few days, much more like my son, in fact, usually, you know, about sort of 4 or 5 days, pretty much the average for me receiving to the end of my cold. So to kick it in kind of 18 hours, the only thing, again, like I say, that I've changed really is the fasting. I still support all of us with the essential oils, and that definitely helps. It helps us to breathe overnight, and so it helps us get a better sleep, and it does definitely help boost the immune system and stuff like that. But I kind of thought, you know, actually, I said to my son today, you know, like, he's like, you never got the cold, Mummy. I said, oh, I did. I said, I was sneezing the other day. I said, but I just sort of kicked it by the middle of the next day. He was like, I've got to do this stuff that you do. That lasted for 5 days with me, that cold. He literally said that to me this afternoon. So I really recommend trying fasting. It's one of the ancient antidotes, if you like, that's been around for the longest. And I think it's free. It's actually going to save you money. It doesn't require you buying any weird or strange or special equipment. It really, the most that I would do is get yourself a journal so that you can note down the things that come up for you. You know me, I'm a huge advocate of journaling anyway, so obviously get a journal, write it down, and really begin to see the reflections that your commitments to eating, your habits, if you like, have given you. And, enjoy the process. Be mindful of it. Know that you're doing yourself this service. Know that this is something that you could do once a week, once a month, however you get on well with it, or is something you can gradually build into doing by just literally reducing the snacks that you take in, so reducing the food load, knowing that just that small change would do your body, the world of good. If you can restrict your eating to within 12-hour points, then again, that would be another massive move forward for your body in terms of digestive health and energy levels. And again, if you can either perhaps skip a meal and do an 8-hour fast, so you eat breakfast, you eat dinner, but you don't do lunch, and you just drink water in between that, that would be amazing. If you then want to go on to like a 16-hour fast, the choice is yours. There's plenty of information about it all on the internet as to the ratios and stuff like that. If you can't quite remember everything that I've said today, this video will be up on YouTube in a couple of days anyway. So you can always go back over if you decide you want to try it on the weekend or something like that. You can always go back over and just listen to the ratios and work in what you think is going to be best for you. But the best thing to do with anything new, any lifestyle change, is to really set out your intentions to begin with. Work out why it is that you want to do this. Work out how it is that you're going to do it. Be realistic. Again, write it all down so that it's not just a thought process that you can kind of like conveniently forget. Write it all down so it's black and white, and keep yourself to your intention. Small steps towards a big goal. That's the way we achieve everything. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for all the wonderful questions. It's great to get involved and have a little bit of communication. And please, if your friend does go through that 7-day fast, let me know how they get on. Love and light to you all. And I'll see you next week for another episode of our Ancient Antidotes. Take care. Goodbye.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just, sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.